Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to save millions of lives and nobody ever know your name? To be completely honest, I never imagined I would be in a position to make such an impact, and yet here I am facing a reality that is almost impossible to believe. It all started on a day like any other. I was walking through the streets thinking about my own routine, worried about bills, worried about the future, worried about all the small, insignificant things that seemed so urgent, until suddenly I stumbled upon a situation that changed everything in an instant. It was one of those moments where your heart stops and your mind races, trying to figure out what to do next. I realized that a decision I made in the next few minutes could affect the lives of millions of people, and the weight of that realization was suffocating, but at the same time thrilling, because for the first time I understood that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if only they dared to act. I knew that if I hesitated or waited for someone else, nothing would happen and countless lives could be lost. And that thought alone forced me to focus and think fast and act even faster. I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my veins. My mind was processing possibilities, risks, consequences, and the one chance I had to make a difference all at the same time. And the craziest part was that nobody around me had the slightest idea of what was unfolding, not even my closest friends, not even my family. And that made it even more daunting, because everything depended entirely on me, and yet a small voice inside kept whispering that I could do it, that I was capable of handling the impossible, and that I had to trust myself no matter how unlikely it seemed. I knew that the story I was about to live would be one I could barely comprehend, and yet one that would define the rest of my life. And it was at that precise moment, standing there feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, that I made a choice to step forward, to take action, to become the hidden hero that nobody would ever know. And if you think it sounds crazy, you are right. It was absolutely insane, but it was also the only way to turn what could have been a disaster into something miraculous. And as I started moving, I realized there was no turning back, and every single step I took from that moment on mattered more than anything else in my life. So stay with me as I take you through the story of how one ordinary person managed to change the fate of millions without anyone ever noticing or ever realizing the truth. And before we dive any deeper, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because stories like this only happen here, and you do not want to miss a single detail of what happens next. Before that day, I had always lived a life that seemed ordinary to anyone watching from the outside. I worked regular hours, I worried about regular things, I went through the motions without expecting anything extraordinary to happen, and yet deep down I had always felt that there was something more, something that mattered, something that could make a difference, if only the right opportunity presented itself. I lived in a small apartment on a quiet street with my closest friends and my family, who loved me but never quite understood the intensity of my thoughts and the way I always analyzed the world around me. And I had a job that paid the bills but offered nothing more than routine and security, and I liked the stability, but secretly I longed for a challenge that would test everything I believed about myself. And then that day arrived in the most unexpected way. I was walking to grab a coffee, thinking about my work, thinking about the bills, and thinking about how normal my life was, when I noticed a small discrepancy, something that most people would have ignored, a detail that seemed insignificant but that immediately caught my attention. I saw a pattern, a potential problem that no one else had noticed, and in that moment I realized that what I had discovered could escalate into something catastrophic if left unchecked, and I understood that it was not a problem for someone else, it was my responsibility to address it. And as I retraced my steps, trying to understand how this could have gone unnoticed, I felt a rush of both fear and excitement, because I knew that I was standing on the edge of something huge, something that could change lives on a massive scale, but also something that could destroy everything if I made a wrong move. I spent hours piecing together the puzzle, examining documents, cross-checking information, making calls, and trying to verify every single fact. And the more I discovered, the more urgent the situation became. And at the same time, I felt the weight of isolation, because nobody could know what I was uncovering. It was too dangerous, too sensitive, too important to discuss with anyone else, and that only added to the pressure. And yet, even with the mounting fear, I felt a strange sense of purpose I had never experienced before. It was as if every small decision I had made in my life had led me to this exact point, to have the skills, the patience, and the determination to face what was coming. And I started to see the bigger picture. I realized that millions of people could be affected if this issue was not addressed immediately, and I knew that it would require careful planning, precise execution, and absolute courage. And I also realized that the stakes were higher than I could have imagined, because the consequences were not just financial or professional, they were human lives, and that understanding made every small detail crucial. And I became consumed by the mission. I immersed myself, completely analyzing every possible outcome, anticipating obstacles, imagining worst-case scenarios, and preparing strategies to overcome them. And all of this happened while the world around me continued as if nothing was happening. People walked by with their phones in their hands, chatting, laughing, living their ordinary lives, oblivious to the fact that one small decision could ripple into consequences that affected millions. And I felt a strange mix of loneliness and determination, because even though nobody knew what I was doing, I knew that I had to act. And there was no turning back. And as the hours turned into days and the complexity of the problem grew, I realized that this was more than just a challenge. This was a test of character, of courage, of resilience, and of the willingness to do what was right even when no one would ever know or appreciate it. And in that realization, I felt a calm focus wash over me, because I knew that I could handle it, and that if I stayed disciplined and patient, I had a real chance to make a difference. And it was in that mindset that I began to prepare for the challenges that were about to come, the decisions, the risks, the obstacles, and the unexpected twists that would push me to my limits and ultimately define me as the hidden hero that nobody would ever know. As I dug deeper into what I had uncovered, I realized that the problem was far bigger than I had initially imagined. Every piece of information I confirmed led to another question, another risk, another layer of complexity. It was as if I had stumbled into a maze with invisible walls where every turn had consequences that could spiral out of control, and I understood that I was not dealing with a simple mistake or a small oversight. This was a situation that could have catastrophic effects on millions of lives if it was ignored, and I could not trust anyone else to act, because either they would not understand or they would not act with the urgency required. And that realization alone was terrifying, because the responsibility fell entirely on my shoulders, and every moment I hesitated, the stakes grew higher, the clock was ticking, and I had to make choices that could not be reversed once made. And yet I had no blueprint, no guide, no mentor, nothing to rely on except my instincts, my logic, and my determination. And that is when the real pressure hit me. It was no longer just about finding a solution. It was about making the right choices at the right time under conditions that were constantly shifting and evolving, and every wrong decision could cost lives. And the more I examined the situation, the more I realized that it was designed to be invisible, that it had layers of concealment and deception that would fool anyone who was not paying attention. And I knew that I had to outthink every possible scenario, anticipate every reaction, and stay 2 steps ahead at all times. And the emotional toll was immense. Every time I slept, every time I took a break, every time I tried to think about anything else, my mind kept returning to the problem, analyzing outcomes, testing possibilities, imagining disasters. And it was exhausting yet exhilarating, because I knew that this was my chance to make a real impact, to step beyond the ordinary and accomplish something that few people in the world ever get to experience. And yet it was also lonely, because no one could share the burden with me. No one could understand the constant stress and the weight of responsibility. And that isolation intensified the pressure, forcing me to rely on my inner strength in ways I had never done before. And as the hours turned into days, I began to see patterns hidden beneath the surface, patterns that suggested potential solutions, but also warned of hidden dangers. And that duality created an endless tension of push and pull, between hope and fear, between action and inaction. And I realized that I could not afford to be paralyzed by fear or distracted by doubts. I had to act decisively, and yet cautiously, balancing speed with precision, knowing that every choice mattered and every error could have devastating consequences. And then there were the external obstacles, the people who unintentionally interfered, the bureaucracies that slowed down action, the misinformation, the false leads, the setbacks that seemed to appear out of nowhere, each one threatening to derail everything I had worked for. And I had to overcome them all while keeping the larger picture in mind, staying focused on the ultimate goal of protecting millions of people whose lives were unknowingly hanging in the balance. And I began to feel the first stirrings of transformation within myself, a deep recognition that I was capable of facing unimaginable pressure, of navigating complexity, of making impossible decisions. And that realization fueled me to push further, to dig deeper, to act faster and smarter than I ever had before. And as the days unfolded, the conflict grew sharper, more immediate, more dangerous. Every step I took was a test, every decision a challenge, every moment a risk. And yet the awareness that I could actually succeed, that I could save countless lives, kept me moving forward, propelling me through the fear, the doubt, the exhaustion, the uncertainty. And that tension became the heartbeat of my mission, the invisible force driving me toward the point where I would have to make the most critical choice of my life. And that is when I understood that the problem was not just external, it was internal. It was a test of courage, of endurance, of belief in myself. And I had to master both the external challenges and the internal doubts if I wanted to survive this ordeal and emerge not only victorious, but also as the hidden hero that nobody would ever know. And the awareness of that dual challenge intensified my focus, sharpened my resolve, and prepared me for the escalation that was about to come, the moment when every obstacle, every risk, every tension would converge into a single decisive moment that would determine everything. Every step I took after realizing the full scope of the problem seemed to lead to another obstacle, another complication, another test of my focus and resolve. It was as if the universe was throwing everything at me at once. Every piece of information I uncovered revealed another hidden danger. Every attempt to move forward faced resistance from systems and people who had no idea what was at stake, and the pressure kept mounting. Because time was running out, and I could feel the weight of millions of lives pressing down on me, and with every passing hour the tension grew, the uncertainty became more intense, and the potential consequences more severe. I had to navigate through a maze of obstacles that were constantly shifting, forcing me to improvise, adapt, and make split-second decisions that could not fail. And yet, despite the overwhelming stress, I found a strange clarity in the chaos of focus that allowed me to see patterns where others would see only confusion, to anticipate problems before they arose, and to plan strategies that balanced risk and reward in ways that most people could not comprehend. And still, every success was tempered by the realization that the next challenge could undo everything. The victories were fleeting, the setbacks brutal, and the suspense unbearable. Yet I could not stop, I could not pause. I had to keep moving, keep thinking, keep acting, because every delay could cost lives. And as I pushed forward, I began to see the true nature of the situation. It was not just about solving a problem, it was about surviving a gauntlet of uncertainty and danger. It was about facing obstacles that seemed impossible and finding a way through them without anyone knowing. And the loneliness intensified because I could not share what I was facing with anyone. Every conversation had to be guarded, every action discreet, every decision invisible to the outside world. And that isolation forced me to rely entirely on my instincts, my intelligence, my courage, and my ability to stay calm under pressure. And then there were the false leads, the dead ends, the traps that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Every time I thought I was making progress, something would shift, a new complication would appear, a hidden variable would emerge, and I would have to rethink my approach, reevaluate my plan, and adapt instantly while keeping the ultimate goal in mind. And it was exhausting mentally, physically, emotionally, but the stakes were too high to falter, too great to hesitate, too urgent to slow down. I could feel my body screaming for rest, my mind begging for a break, but the thought of millions of lives depending on my actions kept me moving, propelled me forward, fueled me through fear, doubt, and fatigue. And with every challenge I overcame, my confidence grew, my understanding deepened, my strategy sharpened, and yet the tension never lessened. It only evolved. It became more complex, more nuanced, more intense. Every decision carried heavier weight, every obstacle seemed insurmountable, every moment felt like a cliffhanger in a story that was unfolding faster than I could process. And I began to anticipate the moments of extreme difficulty, the points where I would have to risk everything with no guarantee of success. And I realized that those were the true tests, the crucibles that would define not just the outcome of the mission, but who I was as a person, as someone capable of extraordinary action in the face of impossible odds. And as the challenges escalated, so did the suspense, the fear, the anticipation. Every step forward was met with uncertainty, every turn a potential disaster, and yet I could not stop. I could not give in to panic. I could not allow hesitation to creep, and I had to move with precision, with courage, with complete focus. And in that state of relentless engagement, I felt both terrified and exhilarated, knowing that the next hours could either lead to total failure or to the moment of triumph that I had been striving toward since the very beginning. And as I faced obstacle after obstacle, setback after setback, complication after complication, I began to feel the tension coalescing into a single inevitable confrontation, a point where everything I had done would be tested, where every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless hour would come together, and the suspense reached a level that was almost unbearable, the kind that makes your heart race, your mind spin, your senses sharpen to an edge. And you know that the moment of truth is coming, and you have to be ready to meet it head on. And I was ready, because despite the fear, despite the fatigue, despite the overwhelming pressure, I had grown into the challenge. I had become capable of facing the impossible, and I could sense that the decisive moment, the turning point that would change everything forever, was just ahead, waiting for me to take the leap. And I knew that once I crossed that threshold, there would be no turning back, and everything would change forever. It all came down to a single moment, a decision that could not be postponed, a choice that would define everything I had worked for, and every instinct in my body screamed that this was the point of no return. I had analyzed every possibility, weighed every outcome, prepared for every obstacle, and yet nothing could truly prepare me for the emotional weight of what I was about to do. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and absolutely necessary all at once. I could feel my heart pounding, my mind racing, my hands trembling as I took a step forward, knowing that one wrong move could undo everything. And then I saw at the opportunity, the single chance that could change the outcome, in an instant, a hidden path of vulnerability that had been overlooked by everyone else. And in that instant, I knew I had to act. I had to trust myself, my instincts, and the countless hours of preparation. Everything I had done had led to this exact moment, and I made the choice to go for it, to take the risk, knowing full well that the consequences could be devastating if I failed. And as I executed the plan, every second stretched into an eternity. Every action required precision, focus, and courage, and the tension was unbearable. But I refused to let fear control me. I pushed forward. I trusted my judgment. I adapted to every unexpected complication in real time. And with every move, I felt the pressure mounting, the stakes higher and higher, but also the awareness that I was in control, that I could make a difference, that I could turn the tide. And then the breakthrough came, a sudden shift, a moment of clarity that allowed me to see the solution unfold, a chain reaction that I had orchestrated. And in that instant, I realized that all the tension, all the fear, all the sacrifice had been worth it, that I had not just acted, I had succeeded in a way that nobody could ever see or understand. And as the consequences of my actions began to take shape, as the threat I had faced started to diminish, I felt a mixture of relief, exhilaration, and disbelief, because the impossible had been accomplished through courage, strategy, and unwavering determination. And I knew that from this point forward, nothing would ever be the same, that I had crossed a threshold that few people ever reach, that I had become the hidden hero that nobody would ever know. And yet, even in that moment of triumph, I understood that the story was not over. There was still a climax to face, consequences to witness, results to experience, the full impact of the actions that I had taken. And I braced myself for that next phase, because while the turning point had been reached, the ultimate test was still ahead, the moment where everything would converge into the final resolution that would define not just the outcome, but the legacy of what had been accomplished. And I felt ready, because despite the fear, despite the exhaustion, despite the isolation, I had proven to myself that I was capable of extraordinary action, and that awareness gave me the strength, focus, and courage to face the climax of the story head on, knowing that the moment of ultimate revelation and resolution was just ahead, and nothing could stop what was about to unfold. The final moments arrived with a force that I had never experienced before. Every decision, every step, every risk I had taken led to this point, and the weight of it all pressed down on me like a tidal wave. My heart raced, my mind sharpened, every sense heightened, and I knew that this was the ultimate test, the moment where all the tension, all the obstacles, all the preparation would be revealed in a single unstoppable chain of events. I faced the situation head on, moving faster, thinking sharper, reacting quicker than I ever had, and every second felt like an eternity. The stakes were unimaginable, the pressure unbearable, yet I could not falter, I could not hesitate, I could not allow doubt to creep in, because everything depended on me. And as I executed the final sequence of actions, every detail mattered, every choice carried unimaginable consequences, and I felt the immense responsibility settle into my bones, knowing that any mistake could undo the countless lives I was trying to protect. And then the chaos began unfolding in ways I had anticipated, and yet could not have fully predicted. Variables shifted, complications arose, unforeseen challenges threatened to derail everything. But I adapted, I reacted, I improvised in real time, trusting my instincts, my planning, my resilience. And slowly the tide began to turn. The actions I had orchestrated started to ripple outward, creating effects that would save lives, prevent disasters, and alter outcomes in ways that nobody would ever see or understand. And the adrenaline surged through me, the fear, the tension, the anticipation, every emotion intensified. Yet I stayed focused, controlled, precise, every movement, every thought synchronized with the unfolding events. And as the final critical moments approached, the full magnitude of what I had accomplished hit me. Millions of lives were now safe, millions of people oblivious to the hero behind the curtain. And the realization brought a mixture of relief, exhilaration, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. I had faced the impossible, navigated through the chaos, overcome impossible obstacles, and emerged victorious, not for recognition, not for praise, not for glory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. And as the dust settled, as the threat diminished, and the world continued unaware, I felt the full emotional impact, the quiet satisfaction of having changed the course of history without anyone ever knowing the magnitude of my actions. And yet, even in this triumph, there was a humbling awareness of the journey, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the fear, the doubt, and the relentless pressure that had brought me to this point. And it was all worth it, because the outcome mattered more than my comfort, more than my recognition, more than anything else in the world. And as I stood there reflecting on everything I had endured, everything I had risked, everything I had achieved, I felt a deep sense of transformation, a recognition that I had grown stronger, wiser, more resilient than I ever imagined possible, and the climax of this story was not just in the external events, not just in the millions of lives saved, but in the internal journey, the evolution of courage, focus, determination, and the unwavering commitment to act when it mattered most. And in that realization, I understood that this was the moment where ordinary became extraordinary, where hidden effort became decisive impact, where the invisible hero changed the course of countless lives, and the emotional intensity reached its peak. Every heartbeat, every thought, every fiber of my being aligned with the knowledge that what I had done was monumental in scale, yet invisible to the world. And as the final effects of my actions fully unfolded, I could finally breathe, feel relief, understand the power of decisive action, and appreciate the quiet heroism that had defined the entire journey. And it was in that pinnacle of the climax that I knew the story was about to shift into its final surprising twist, the resolution that would leave a lasting impact, and a final revelation that nobody would see coming. Even after everything was resolved, I realized that the true impact of what I had done would never be known to anyone else. Millions of lives had been saved, yet nobody would ever know my name or see the effort, the risk, the sleepless nights, the decisions that had made it possible. And at first that felt strange, almost hollow, as if the absence of recognition diminished the significance of the accomplishment. But then I understood that the real reward was not in acknowledgement, it was in the lives preserved, in the knowledge that my actions mattered, in the invisible difference I had made. And the final twist of the story was that the greatest surprise was not external, it was internal. I had discovered a strength, courage, resilience, and clarity within myself that I never knew existed, a realization that the ordinary person is capable of extraordinary action when faced with impossible circumstances. And as I reflected on everything I had endured, I saw the subtle signs that had been there all along, clues and hints that if I had paid closer attention could have guided me sooner. But the beauty of it was that the journey itself had shaped me. The tension, the fear, the obstacles had transformed me into someone capable of facing unimaginable challenges. And even as I walked away from the situation, knowing that no one would ever know the truth, I felt a deep satisfaction, a quiet pride, a sense of completion that no recognition could replace. And that is the essence of being a hidden hero, doing what must be done, not for applause, not for fame, not for glory, but simply because it is right. And in that moment I understood that the invisible impact, the silent courage, the unseen heroism is often the most powerful of all. And as I stepped forward into the next chapter of my life, I carried with me the profound awareness that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things, and that sometimes the most remarkable stories are the ones that remain hidden yet resonate forever in the lives they touch. And even as the world went on oblivious to my actions, I knew that what had been accomplished would ripple through time quietly, profoundly, and that realization left me both humbled and exhilarated, knowing that the greatest victories are often the ones nobody sees. If you have been amazed by this story, if you felt the tension, the suspense, the triumph, the hidden heroism, I want you to take a moment right now to show your support by hitting the like button, because every like helps these incredible stories reach more people who need to hear them. And if you are not already part of this community, make sure you subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you never miss another story like this, because we bring you the most incredible real life events that you will not find anywhere else. And while you are here, there is another video waiting for you on the screen right now, a story just as gripping, just as emotional, just as mind-blowing, and I promise you it will keep you on the edge of your seat. And the more you engage, the more we can continue to deliver content that is intense, emotional, and truly unforgettable. So take a second, click like, subscribe, and check out the video on the screen now, and trust me, you do not want to miss it, because stories like these are rare stories that teach us courage, resilience, and the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And as you watch, remember that you too can be the hidden hero in your own life, taking action, making a difference, impacting people in ways that are invisible yet powerful. And never underestimate what you are capable of, because just like the story you have seen today, the smallest actions can lead to the greatest changes. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this journey. And now go watch that next story and keep the inspiration alive.